Alright, so let's start. My name is Alona, and guys, I am with Barbara today. She is the manager of the VOSE. Did I pronounce it right?
So it's Vose Enterprises.
VOSE.
Yeah.
VOSE.
And my role is Vice President of Sales.
Oh
That's my
my
role. Yeah.
God! So she is not just a manager, but a vice
Well,
president.
but it's a manager still, yeah.
Mm-hmm. But how did you like come up with that level of your role? Is it like you got promoted or?
Well, I was always, like when I was younger, when I went into sort of sales, marketing, merchandising, when I was in my 20s, right? I sort of, I came up through design and merchandising and marketing. And so when I got in the fashion business, I just had a natural tendency to really work well with buyers and to work well with salespeople and to work well with the external world versus inside. So I just ended up taking that path. So, you go in first, you have become a sales territory manager, and then you become like a regional sales manager of other people, and then you become like a country sales manager. And then, you start to be involved more with the corporation. So they typically bring you inside and you become like a senior sales manager, like then vice president of sales type of thing. So, but I mean, that's been something I worked at in my 20s and 30s.
Oh,
yeah. So by the time I was mid 30s, I was like a vice president of sales.
Yeah. So like, do you have like a sort of quota or target?
Yes,
for
definitely.
the team?
Yeah. Yeah.
That's how you motivate, and how you motivate your sales team people.
Yeah, well, we can say that's how you motivate them. It provides the foundation or the framework for which you are working together. So it's not just hello, how are you, Alona? It's, hi, Alona. Let's go through our sales budget for the year. Let's look at what we did last year. Let's look at the year prior. Let's look at the economy. Let's look at what programs you have in place. And then you establish the quota. And that's, I wouldn't say that's the motivation, it's the framework for which you start to work together. And then you have that relationship. And then I would say the motivators might be things like, commissions or commission bonuses or special prizes or trips, and I think there's something about the way you also work together. Right, they're motivated by your leadership style and that sort of thing.
Yeah, and talking about, you've mentioned it, the leadership style. What's your leadership style?
I would say would be supportive, direct and transparent, clear, but firm. Yeah. There's like an expectation. Yeah. But so very collaborative.
Oh yeah.
Collaborative, but definitely with giving them good direction. Yeah.
At least you're clear from the very beginning.
Very clear. I try to be very clear.
Oh, yeah. That's good. And second question is, like, was that kind of leadership change prior to pandemic and after the pandemic, or it's still the same?
Oh gosh, I think it's changed. So I came on to this company in the middle of the pandemic. And I saw the change myself. So prior to the pandemic, people came into the office 5 days a week. There was no exception, right? Unless you had a sick mom at home and something happened, or a sick baby or something that, but it was very clear you worked 5 days a week, you worked in the office. If you were sick, you took a sick day. If you had to do something like your mom was sick, you took a personal day. And it was very black and white and clear, right? And I know that the owners of the company, that's how it ran. There was no other thing. So then I see a big difference, which is quite challenging after the pandemic. So we get a lot of people that want to work from home. A lot of people that call in that day and say, oh, I decided to work from home. Or I'm not feeling well, so I'm going to work from home today. So it creates a lot of things. It creates, if you're not feeling well, then take a sick day. So here we are paying you for the day you're not feeling well, right? So there's ambiguity. There is this thing where you never know what team you're going to have, because you know, they're supposed to be here on a Thursday, but then they call and say I'm working from home today, right? So there's a lot of ambiguity. It's hard to set up a schedule. It's hard to question people because it's become more of a norm now in places that you can work from home. Like some places, if you're in a factory line, you can't do that from home, right? If you're a nurse, you can't necessarily do that from home. But some of these, you know, we're in the business world, so a lot of these things can be done from home, but then we don't necessarily have the infrastructure to always check the productivity if they work from home, right? So we're struggling with it now. We're a small organization, so at the end of the day, we don't have all this human resources and stuff like that, right? So it's actually become quite problematic. And then I see that, you know, some staff that might have been prepared to work 5 days a week see people that are often working from home, right? And so kind of like, well, if they're working from home, I'm going to work from home, right? So how we're trying to deal with it is to sort of say, okay, like kind of go with the flow, be modern, you know, so why don't you work from home on Tuesday, Wednesday? But it doesn't always work out like that. I mean, if it did, it might be a bit easier. So it is quite challenging. So it's changed a lot.
So what kind of solution did you do for those kinds of circumstances?
I think, again, goes back to clarity, right? And we do this thing, we started this thing called SMART goals. So it's kind of like more accountability for the days you are at home. Right, so it's almost like at the end of the day at 4 o'clock. Okay, what did you accomplish that day? Right,
like
you know,
a sort of tracker.
A tracker.
Did you
Yeah. So we've put, you know, the more senior people, I wouldn't say would have the tracker. Theirs would be they have deliverables every week. So I mean, they'd have to work till midnight 2 nights a week if they're going to take that day off or something. So you can see. If they haven't got where they needed to get to, there's an issue. So I would tracker is the best way to sort of describe it. That we now put deliverables in. Everybody's clear what they have to achieve because you can't technically monitor everything they're doing, right?
Especially in your role.
Exactly.
It's too much. It's too high for them that you will be the one to monitor it. Somebody in your lower level of management has to do the monitoring, or
they do. But it's sort of there's an office manager person there, and he does the salespeople. So there's different levels, right? Like there's customer service, there's accounting, there's like receiving, you know, exactly. So those are sort of inside functions, but the salespeople have always been on the road. So for the most part, they've been working on their own. You know, they've been working from home. A lot of them have home offices, right? Because they're in different areas of different provinces of the country. So I don't think things have changed that much for them, to be honest. If they're not out with their customer, they're not getting commission, they're not getting sales. So it's really clear what's happening there, right?
I see.
Yeah.
All right, thank you. And then as a VP of the sales team, how does personality bias affects you when assessing team before and after the pandemic?
So I know what personality bias is. So are you asking if I have a different look at things since the pandemic? Interesting. Interesting.
Like, do you have that personality biases? Like, you know, this people is good, and you're just looking into what something good he did, and then you will be relying on that kind of a trait of that people to assess his performance like that. Or no, it's just
I'm trying to think how to answer that. Like nothing has changed for me since the pandemic in sales. I think certainly if you were to ask somebody in the office every day, I'm not sure if I'm answering this right, but in the personality bias, those that are reliable and do what they say they're going to do and are consistent to do that would be given more leeway. So that is a for sure since the pandemic. So if somebody says, okay, I'm working from home Tuesdays and Thursdays, I'll have my report to you by 5 o'clock. Those people that are consistent, take those days, get their, trackables in by the end of the day. There's a personality bias towards allowing them to work more from home. If that answers your question there.
Yeah,
and those that don't do that, or I want to switch it to this day, or I want to do it Monday and Fridays, and I didn't get a chance to do my tracker, they're watched very carefully and reined in, actually reined in, and some of them lose the privilege of working from home.
Yeah,
You know, it's
that's
not,
good.
yeah, so that's definitely different. For me in sales, I can't say, actually it's the reverse. I would say, if anything, I say to my reps now, if they didn't get to a customer, it's like, well, did you try Zooming that customer? Where I wouldn't have had that option before. I would have said, they would have had to go in the car and see the customer. So I would say, like, that's new, right? For me to kind of say, well, if you can't get to the customer, did you Zoom them? Did you send them a package? You know, like, what else have you done to try to make the sales happen? So if anything, I'm using some of the techniques from work from home and finding those are helpful. But I think for the salespeople, like, if they don't, to me, it always comes down to, do you make your sales? Did you make your targets? Do you have new customers? That sort of thing, right? So, yeah.
It's important that the performance at the end of the day.
At the end of the day, that's one thing about sales. It's like, you either have it or you don't, right?
So, we've mentioned about, I mean, we've talked about a bit on your motivation. Did it change before and after the pandemic?
My own personal motivation?
No, your motivation to the team.
No, I can't say that. What I will say is there's a general feeling, like a real feeling actually, that since the pandemic, the industries have not recovered. There's a, I don't want to say pessimistic, but a worry kind of environment out there. People can't seem to get back to the stage they were before the pandemic. It's almost like before Christ, after Christ. It feels like before pandemic and after pandemic, like it's harder to get the sales. It's harder everything is hard, like logistics, working with China, trying to get boats through, trying to get on airlines. Everything has gotten expensive. So I would just say it hasn't felt good since the pandemic. It's not back to normal. And I don't feel...
And it will not be?
I don't think for a long time. Yeah, I think at this stage, I think it feels to people like another maybe 4 or 5 years. Yeah, it feels long. Yeah.
It will be long.
Yeah.
Okay. Next question. What role does purpose or meaning play in your work or life now compared to before?
The purpose?
Yeah.
I think, if I'm answering this one right, I think a lot of us before the pandemic took things for granted. You know, we're on a bit of a treadmill, you know, like go, like this. And I think the pandemic for both employees and management alike has had them realize just how quickly things can all go down. So I think a renewed sense of kind of family, personal time, spiritual time. I think life-work balance for sure.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So, but I think it all. So that's sort of the positive part. I think the negative part is a sort of a kind of a low-grade depression and worry, almost like, you know, when you're a little kid, you're this sort of free kid, and you know, everything is beautiful flowers and butterflies and whatnot, and then you get to a stage where you have your first real kind of experience that's negative, and it's kind of like, I think that's how it's felt for people, like your innocence is a bit lost, you know. So, but having said that, the positive is, you know, the renewed personal time, the work-life balance, and I think there's definitely been a move away towards not necessarily, I'm trying to think of the right word, like there used to be very much a loyalty to the employer. I don't see this as much anymore. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. So let's go for the team dynamics and analysis. What were the biggest teamwork challenges you've experienced before the pandemic, and how did you compare to those during and after the pandemic?
Well, I would say before the pandemic, whether we thought about it or not, there really was this kind of manager style where, okay, this is what we're doing, everybody meet at 8 o'clock, here's we're going over this is the agenda. So it was very kind of structured, not a lot of roping in people, like it was what you said is what happened, right? So a kind of a like simple. Now I
Easy.
find it's like, oh, so and so needs to work from home that day, or so and so's got a doctor's appointment, or so and so this is going on. So now you're having to be way more, I'm trying to think the right word,
Flexible?
flexible, but there's another word. Flexible is one word, but there's another word. It's like, you almost have to watch what you say because you can't, you can't. It's almost like it's a very become quite human resource thing now, right? Like you can't say, if they're taking a lot of sick days or something, you can't kind of say, well, what's wrong?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And so you're not having that loyal and obedient. I'd say obedient might be the right word, but I can't think of another word, even though I don't feel it was that kind of a relationship, but that's about, they're not obedient. They're not kind of falling in line. Yeah, okay, I'll work my schedule to meet Barbara on Tuesday at 8:00. It's more like I'm having to bend to their schedule.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, not 100%, but that's the difference, right? And then trying to get everybody to agree that you have to be in the office at least 2 or 3 days, all of you, so we can get some stuff done. Otherwise it's just Zooms. Like it's very disjointed. It feels very disjointed. Yeah, hard to create team when you don't have team there. And it's also interesting that people, and again I can only compare it to sort of my younger days, people enjoyed kind of team things. So a team thing might look like let's go after dinner or after work for drinks on a Friday or something, and people just aren't as interested in this kind of thing. Now it could be a big city thing, like Vancouver's a big city. It's hard to get around, there's traffic, people want to go home. A lot of people don't live in the city, they have to commute. But there's definitely something around, they're happy to do sort of team, but inside, like inside team only. Yeah.
Big difference before and after,
yes,
right?
Definitely, yeah.
Okay, so how was the collaboration before and after the pandemic, and how did you meet your team goal?
So collaboration before was like everybody was in the office Monday to Friday, wasn't a lot. And that's the other thing that's interesting is now when people, they call in sick, oh, I've got a cold. Well, they're given this automatic pass because it could be COVID. Right? So it's a bit like a scapegoat because it's like, so nobody wants to say, come in and spread your germs. I think there's a lot more awareness of health now, right? It's like, if I can work from home and I've got the flu, but I still feel well enough to work, which often you can, then better that than come make everybody else sick. So that's changed a lot. That fluidity, the flexibility, the permission to stay at home when you're sick, even if you work from home, and that's that whole part, is it a sick day or is it not? But often people are working, so that's quite a bit different. So before, again, you'd have the team there all the time. So if you wanted to do a spontaneous thing, like, hey, so-and-so just got engaged, let's all just, order in lunch today, or, oh, emergency just came up with, Trump tariffs or something like that. We need a meeting today at 3:00, everybody on board. Like that kind of stuff was easy before the pandemic. And now it's just you're coordinating schedules. And it's very interesting, the owner, who's 70, who has her whole life walked into an office and everybody's there, has had a really hard time managing, because she'll say, well, I need so-and-so. And I'll say, well, just call them. Well, no, they're at home today. They're working. Call them. It's just that they're not in the office beside you. So she has had a really hard time adjusting and being effective, I would say. Because she's like, well, they're not here, I don't want to bother them. Well, they're working for you at home. So that's been quite an adjustment, since.
Because she's not get used to it. So if it's not with her and she's not seeing the person, she's not there, and she doesn't want to bother them.
Yeah, even though they're working for her from home and she's paying them.
Yeah.
So but that's her age, right? Whereas in my situation as a sales manager, like I explained to, like I could be managing people, and I have managed people all over the world. So in a case like that, they were never beside you. So you have to be in contact enough to know they're engaged. You have to be looking at their sales numbers to know they're out doing the job. You have to be in connection with their customers to know they're happy. Do you know what I mean? So yeah, I have other way. I'm used to it. In many ways, it didn't change a lot for me, other than not maybe going out and seeing customers during COVID. We'd have to do it on Zoom and stuff like that. Yeah.
Always in Zoom. A lot of changes. Where am I? Oh yeah, about conflict and negotiation tactics. How were conflicts within your team typically handled before and after the pandemic?
It's interesting. I think what I've noticed, I'm going to talk about inside first, right?
Yeah.
I think before the pandemic, it was possibly a bit more authoritarian, I would say, even though that may not be the right word, but a bit more kind of, it's my way, it's my company, here's the hours, here's this, here's that, right? Or, if I want to take vacation, well, let me see if it works for the company and that kind of thing. Since the pandemic, I see a lot more, again, like including the person, like, checking in, like it's just including the staff in the decisions and being a lot more flexible and working with them, more communication, more transparency. Yeah, I just would say that's a big difference. Yeah, more collaboration. Yeah, more consider others a lot more. Yeah.
And how did the absence of face-to-face interactions affect the way disagreements were expressed or resolved?
I would say the biggest thing is when somebody's somewhere in person, right, on a regular basis, there's kind of this thing called relatedness. So it's harder to be mad, it's harder to be negative, it's harder to ask for unreasonable things. So when you're face to face, like before the pandemic, there's a better bond. There's more of a feeling of family. There's more of like, oh, I don't want to hurt that person's feelings, so I'll just go along with stuff, or that kind of thing. Whereas I would say since the pandemic, it's no problem for someone just to email and say, oh, I'm not feeling well today, I work from home. Right? And I honestly say the loyalty is not the same. We definitely see this is, but I think that's in general a result of COVID, where people were like, if something happened to me and I died, like the company doesn't really care, but my family who I hadn't really seen. So I think that's just a general, I feel that's across the board. You'll always get the real hard workers and stuff, but across the board, I think people have come to that realization. Yeah.
That's right. That's why they have to take care more of themselves.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. And that's what's happened actually. Yeah.
Okay, so for the organizational process, what rituals, events, or behavior defines your workplace culture before and after the pandemic?
So I would say before the pandemic, a lot more socialization. So whether it be, let's everybody sit together at lunch, let's have a barbecue. It's a sunny day because our company has barbecues set out there. Let's go for like a walk with the dogs, because actually it's a dog friendly environment. So everybody takes their dogs to work. It's pretty casual in Vancouver.
Nice.
So I would say prior to the pandemic, there just was a lot of that spontaneous and sometimes planned events, because everybody was there. It was very lively. One of the issues we've had actually since the pandemic with some of the younger people, we've had a few people leave, and when you're doing an exit interview, they'll say like it's just so flat. There's no culture.
Oh, really?
But what's happened is everybody's working from home.
Oh yeah.
So what was there before, like that vibrant, spontaneous, everybody's in the office, chatting, collaborating ideas and that kind of thing, that really is gone. Think about it, right? So you have an office, there's one person over here and there's one person over there, and 3 people are working from home, and there's just not, and that person may not even know that person that well. Whereas when there's sort of a bunch of you in an office, they're just, the music is on, and, or it's a long weekend and everybody starts chatting, and maybe bring in a celebrity, something, I don't know, early wine or something, but that seems to have all gone.
Oh.
And what also is interesting is because business has been quite challenging since COVID, you're not even getting the management willing to kind of spend more money either.
Yeah.
And that's the biggest thing I see, right? They're not willing to kind of like, and almost they don't seem to have the time or make the time because they're so busy. I mean, I know myself, I'm like just crazy busy, but sometimes you're not making more money or making more sales. It just takes that much more to get what you already had. Does that make sense? Like, so I'd say the biggest change is just this whole kind of team socialization, spontaneity that was there, like almost like its own culture. There was enough people to do that, and now you go in and actually some of these young people that left, they go in and you know what they say to us is like, why do I even need to come into the office? Like there's either no one here or no one worthwhile here. I don't need these people here. I can do it from my... So that's kind of I think they don't see the value in coming into the office. And unless someone teaches you about networking or the skills you can learn from other people, they don't see any value coming in. So it's a very flat, and then you have to have, so then even when you have a meeting, it's not like everybody sit around and let's, just enjoy some sandwiches and let's have a lunch meeting. 2-3 people are on the Zoom on a computer, so that's not the same thing either, right?
And you don't even know, are they really like listening and paying attention to the meeting?
Yeah, exactly.
They're doing something else, the camera is off.
Yeah, exactly.
But I didn't realize that culture can be also like something like a factor that people leave. There's something like culture has been gone, there's no culture like that. I didn't realize those things before. Now I know it's part of like the reason for people to leave.
Well, I think again it goes back to before COVID, people didn't think about it as much, where after COVID it's like, no, if I'm going to work this hard or this long, particularly if you're qualified, like if you're not qualified, sometimes you have to start at different places and work up, right? And you don't have that privilege, but it's certainly if you're qualified and you have a choice between this place or that place, culture does make a difference, right? And some cultures can be quite toxic, really poor managers. We don't have anything like that, but I will say that I have noticed since the pandemic, the owner of our company really took a beating, like a financial beating, right? And in some ways, I'm trying to think of the right word, her experience, which was quite negative during the pandemic financially and whatnot, she's lost some confidence. And so therefore, in some ways, I think that gets transferred a bit onto the employees. Do you know what I mean? So that's not good either. Or wasn't like it was. If you're saying what's the difference before and after, I think she was way more optimistic.
After?
No, before. And now she's not as optimistic. So if you're not as optimistic, you're not as generous, you're not as positive. You know what I mean? You're seeing, well, everything's compared to what was before. Well, sometimes you just have to take what is and work with what is. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I agree on that. Next is, how would you describe the level of employee engagement and morale before and after the pandemic?
Well, I think employee engagement before was strong because, as I mentioned, you have everybody there, right? And so everybody got in and had an opinion and heard something because it's they could hear what's going on over there. So I'd say quite high. It was just quite high. I would say employee engagement since the pandemic, I wouldn't say it's low, I would just say it's moderate. It's not as high. And a lot of that has to do with, it's kind of, because you're working from home, there's a lot of these isolation stuff going on. Like, it's like, I don't know about that because I'm not there. And there's no other way I would know unless I was there, because it's really none of my business, right? Because I'm just working on these projects. So I would say it's gone from high to sort of moderate. And with newer people, I would say could even be low engagement. And low engagement to me could be described as just coming in, putting your jacket down, your lunch, working and leaving.
That's it.
They're not seeing, the younger people are not seeing the value in relationships in the office.
Oh.
Yeah.
What do you think could be the reason why they just don't care?
They don't see the value. Like, they just don't. I think some of the older people understand that if you are good, if you collaborate and help your team, they'll help you. If, let's say, your mom gets sick and you're having a bad pregnancy or something, and your energy's not as good. I think that they understand. Some older people understand. If I've got a good team, I'm a good team member, and they're a good team member to me, and I need those people. If nothing else, just to enjoy my day, right? Like, that's part of my day. Whereas I think the younger people, and that could be anywhere from really 22 to sort of 35.
The millennials.
Yeah, they don't see the value.
Yeah, I think it also has the reason, or it's also has something with related to their generation.
Yes, yeah. But they really, like, they just, if they get a break, they just as soon go on their social media than to talk to you or I, right?
Yeah, just go there, work, leave, that's it.
That's it. And what I think what's missing is a reference if you want to go work somewhere. This is really big in Canada, have references, right? Particularly as you move up the ladder. I think they're missing that. I think they're missing the learning and the mentoring and the coaching that you get from working with anybody. You always can learn,
Yeah.
So they're in isolation, really. And, so that's definitely different since COVID.
Yeah, it's very it's very easy for especially the new generation working in the office, talk to somebody else older than them with more experience than them because they learned. And the pandemic time, they got nothing to talk to.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, and how did the employees respond to changes in the workflow, policies, or expectations during the pandemic?
I mean, I think, well, it was a lot of change during the pandemic. We lost some really, I'll tell you what changed during the pandemic. During the pandemic, we had 6 or 7 people that commuted from, say, Coquitlam or Port Moody or some of these places into Vancouver, right? They did that for years. Some of them were with us 15, 20 years. And they decided during COVID that they no longer wanted to commute and that they didn't have to because they could work for companies and work remote. So that was a big thing that happened during the pandemic from a staff point of view. We didn't get those people back.
Oh.
So it's either you let them work from home. And unfortunately, my boss didn't understand that that's where it was kind of going. If she had have understood that, she may have said, well, hold on a second. But some of them you couldn't work from home. One of them was an office manager. And like, there's just certain positions you really need to be in the office. So that changed a lot. What was the rest of the question there? How they react to the policies?
How did they respond, to the workflow, policies, or expectations?
You know what, they did great. I mean, other than the people that left for personal reasons, I think one of the things that's a really big difference, if I can point out, that happened before the pandemic and after. Before the pandemic, our company was not set up for anyone to work from home. We didn't have a proper VPM to do that. We didn't have, you couldn't even do customer service at home. We just didn't have not only the equipment, but the software system set up for them to do order entry and stuff like that. So since the pandemic, the owner has made that anybody can work from home. So whether it's they have a laptop or whether they have screens and whatever they need to work from home, they now have all that. So that's been a big change for our company, like on an IT level, to be able to do that.
Yeah, so when people know everything can be done
exactly
in your house, so they no longer want to go back.
Yeah, exactly. And they can find enough employers that are okay with that. Again, a lot of employers have developed tools where they know the job is being done, and they don't
Yeah.
they don't even necessarily care. Like, let's say somebody, I don't know, has to leave at 4 o'clock or something one day or whatnot. You know, the night before they may have worked till 7, so the employee is finding a way to get it done. Do you know what I mean? They're finding a way to get it done. Yeah.
They're like, I think somebody, I've experienced that before. Like, they say, oh, when your screen is like popping up something, they said they are monitoring what you're doing, what's in your screen, like that.
We don't do that.
You don't.
No,
do that.
we don't do that. I think the owners think that's personal privacy thing. Yeah, but I can see why some people do that, but we don't do anything like that.
Yeah. Next is what kind of support, emotional or technical, logistic, whatever support you've offered or the company offered to help employees through the transition.
Of the pandemic,
Yeah.
I would say, well, our health plan does
Health.
it does have like you know, you call in to talk to like a therapist, I guess. And they
Oh, yeah.
they had that on the health plan, and they were encouraged to take use of that.
Oh, yeah. So that's like in a health kind of
Yeah,
support.
like our medical plan, like our company medical plan had that, and that was, and you know, we did have human resources, you know, as well. It's a smaller company, so the human resource person does more than just human resources.
In your opinion, what was the most successful organizational change made during the pandemic?
I would say the whole thing about like IT, well, IT, the whole thing about being able to work from anywhere, that we invested in that system, and I think that was the smartest thing that we did.
To continue the business.
Yeah.
Yeah. And about the leadership practices, how did leadership handle performance feedback and recognition before and after the pandemic?
I would say before the pandemic, it was taken quite seriously. I would say after the pandemic, there's not this accountability thing. It's just not the same.
Oh, like for the staff level?
Yeah, at the staff level.
Less accountable?
They want to be less accountable. Yeah.
And so how would it, because it probably will be affecting their incentives, right? In quota.
Let me think about that. I think I go back and kind of say, before the pandemic, there was a sort of a quite systematic foundational set of protocols, right? Which the employee responded by following them 100%, right? So after pandemic, I think we're all still finding our ways, like even at the Royal Bank, like all these people are finding their ways to get people back to work, and employees are kind of fighting it. They're fighting this. Why should I be in there 5 days a week, right? And they're also fighting things like, if I want to take a long weekend and I live an hour and a half away from the office, why would I want to come in, take till 7 o'clock at night to get home, when I could just work from home that Friday and really enjoy my life and leave at 5 o'clock, you know what I mean, and go to the lake or something. So there's, I don't know if it's less accountability. I think, you know what it is, employees have just become very common sense. Like before, they would have never questioned that.
Yeah, like I have to do the work. That's it, regardless of the vicinity, like that. But now they have to take care more of themselves in the work-life balance.
Yes, exactly. Well, it's in many ways, it's like they're looking and going, well, that doesn't make sense for me to get all dressed, go in an hour and a half to do something I could do at my house and be happier, you know, and I don't have to struggle with parking and traffic, and you know, if it rains that day, then it's worse traffic. So they've become quite common sense, and very much this loyalty thing has been drifting for a long time. But I think it's definitely they'll only work for a company if it makes sense.
Yeah, but for the people like been a consistent performer, Like there's no problem with them letting them work.
No, again, it goes back to some people did it anyway as part of their job, kind of before, but just, you have to do it. It goes back to the same thing, is we make a plan, you do what we say, we both agree to on the plan, you try not to change it very much because then it upsets the workflow, you stick to that, you have an accountability if you're trackables or whatever. And if you can kind of stick to that and take a reasonable amount of sick days. This is the other thing, when people are starting to take a sick day a month and stuff, people are like, but this other employee is never sick. So it's what's reasonable, a couple of days a year maybe is reasonable, but it's like a sick day every month. So I think that, it's just finding other ways to, and it's like, and it's not fair that they have to be there in full view for you to understand they can do a good job, right?
Yeah. All right. So how did you manage stress, conflict, or burnout during and after the pandemic?
Well, I think during the pandemic is you can't control what you can't control. So I think it's to understand, I think for all of us, right? It was like from the very beginning, it was, you can't control things that are not in your control, but you can control cutting back costs in the business or laying people off or, finding other ways to keep your company going. So initially it was, control the controllables, but to, try not to take in the worry of the uncontrollables, right? So I think there was a conscious effort there. I think a huge effort to try to make sure the company didn't lose more than was necessary. Being honest and transparent with people, to lay them off and whatnot. So I think that's how that was kind of handled. What was the other part of that question?
It's still like stress, conflict, and burnout. How did
Well, my boss actually did burn out.
Oh yeah?
Yeah, she did.
Oh my God,
she did.
hard.
Yeah, she took off almost a good year. I mean, she was still involved in the business, but we were running it. And because I think things had come back. So why she trusted everybody running it without her was she, A, was burnt out. B, it was coming back to a level that was so much better than the pandemic that it was just felt better. Like it felt better for her. She didn't feel, she felt she could leave. She was so burnt out, she couldn't even.
Oh my God. How does it feel? Like normally it's the people under you feeling burnout. You do like motivation, pep talk with them, encourage them. But how is it when somebody upper, higher than you has...
Well, I think it has a detrimental effect because I think people see how scared she is or how burnt out she is. And really in some ways you're having to parent her and calm her down. But she recognized that, so she kind of left the business for a year. Now she was very involved. She still Zoomed and we had key meetings with her and stuff like that, but she was on a beach. She was in France or somewhere, so she needed to do that to take on the next part of the business. But she was good with the staff in the sense that like she's very pragmatic and very much a realist, and so she tried to help where she could. We all tried to help everybody where we could, and we'll get through this together. We're a team, and a lot of the team did stay. The only ones I was telling you about, the ones that were far away, were like, I'm not going to take another job that takes me an hour and a half to get to work, sort of thing. So, but she actually did. I don't even know if I would call it burnout. It was. I just think financially it was such a worry for her. To go all of a sudden from shipping. $1 million a month to shipping nothing, and you're still paying for all the buildings and all that kind of stuff, right?
Yeah. So, how did senior leader maintain alignment, trust, and motivation across the company during the time of uncertainty?
I think there was just like the regular meetings, regular meetings, right? Yeah. So here's what's going on. Transparency, regular meetings. Clarity. I think good leadership in the sense that people just needed to hear something. There was a weekly check-in, like, because at one point people were just home because there was nothing to do. And I just keeping lines of communication open. You know, if somebody wanted to talk, then they were given the opportunity to talk. And like I said, they offered up that health benefit. There's people to talk to. You know, there was a lot of, I don't know if you recall, but there was a lot of, you couldn't even get a therapist during COVID. You couldn't even, so if you weren't already enrolled in a program or had a therapist, you had a problem.
Oh my.
Yeah. So we were lucky because this was part of our program anyway. Yeah.
So how is it like they're doing the monthly or the regular updates or alignment from the upper management down to the staff level?
Yeah.
Okay, so everybody is aware what's happening, what's going on.
Yeah, and those were done pretty much at that stage, I think Zoom was just starting. So initially it would have been telephone calls, like a conference call. And then it went to sort of Zoom, because Zoom got kind of developed during that time. So, and everybody would just, here's what's going on. And now I will say, in Vancouver, because of the outdoor environment, it's warmer and stuff, right? So, whereas in Toronto, you weren't allowed to go into an office, or Quebec, you couldn't go into an office, out there, they were allowed, because it was, I can't explain it to you, it was almost like, I don't know if you probably didn't watch because you probably weren't even here, but the person that was the Minister of Health out there, she really worked BC really well. There was like less cases, less people being emergent. And I think a lot of it because people could be outdoors. They could actually have lunch outdoors. Even, I remember going out there in November at one point, and we had coffee outside. I mean, you'd never have, it was November or December, we had coffee outside. It was very pleasant. So I think the weather helped with that.
I think.
Yeah. But no, it's just keeping everybody in the loop, and
So before the pandemic, you were living in Vancouver too?
No, I was here.
You're here.
Yeah, and then I was hired just before the pandemic, and was out there in an Airbnb. You know, I'd be like 1 month there, a month and a half back here, a month there, back and forth, and I would just stay out there when I was there. So.
I see. Second to the last question, was there a noticeable change in leadership priorities after the pandemic? Like digital transformation, employee well-being, cost control?
I would say that, well, there was the whole IT, make sure everybody could work from home. I would say a huge cut on spending, because I think she had gotten so hurt and was so scared that it was just almost like a new style of leadership, much more stringent with the money, much more cautious, like a lot less inventory. Like it was like everything got thought about, because she lost a fair amount of money in the situation, right? So that would have happened. Cautiousness, the money, the pulling back, I would say, not as many employees. More employees doing different jobs in the same job, that kind of thing. I think that would be the biggest thing.
And if another crisis were to happen, what would you expect leaders at both the micro and macro levels to do differently?
That's a good question. I think it so depends on the kind of crisis it is, right? Like
when crisis happen, that's the time that you will think something to adapt to it and do something to.
Let me just think about that for a second.
It's okay.
I mean, I think that since the pandemic, people are more aware and have become more stringent on kind of emergency plans. I feel now, like it's like, what happens if my system goes down? Is it backed up? Like, can my people work from home? It's a bit more like, what's the emergency plan? I do feel that's talked about more. I feel that leaders take classes in that now. I feel that there's they added that to the realm of things that they needed to know, but that they didn't actually think about before. So I feel that that's, I feel that the company is much more tuned to sort of more working capital. You know, you can't, you know, you certainly can't be going by a string, like it's just a tight cash flow, because you just wouldn't be able to sustain yourself. So I think there's something there. Yeah, that's, you know, I don't know if there's anything else. Just certainly much more of an awareness, and the digital part, like that we transformed digitally for sure, 100%. That was the biggest thing that came out of this, I would say, to work from anywhere, to do anything, to be able to pivot quickly. Yeah, and I think hire employees that in many ways are quite flexible, and I see a move towards employee hires that are quite compatible digitally. Like it's not just employees that can show up, but they know how to digitally use things properly, computers and things like that.
Yeah, I got it. I've got a lot of things that I've learned just today.
Oh, good.
Thank you, Barb.
Yeah,
That's
no,
all
I'm
the
just trying to think of it. If
questions
I think of
have for
anything
you.
else while you're here today,
It's okay.
I'll write them down. I've got like quite a few Zoom calls and stuff, but I'll write them down because there might be something else that kind of comes up.
Like something that you can prepare on.
Yeah, if I think of something, because yours is more like, I'm just trying to think if anything else has changed.